This is probably the most surprised that I've been at the end of testing a build with where I think it would have ended up at the beginning of it. And what if I told you right now that you could take pure Fire Druid without an infinity, go farm Chaos Sanctuary in about 3.5 minutes? Seems kind of nuts, right? Well, that's what is now available to you on the pure Fire Druid. So let me go ahead and throw in the video right over here. And let's talk about how the build functions, what you need to understand about it now that the casting delays are singular to each skill and no longer overlap, and why I'm running around without infinity on a fire build seems pretty buck wild. We are teching down into Summon Grizzly and one point into Oak Sage, and then everything else goes into the elemental tree. So we are maxing Armageddon, Volcano, Fissure, and Molten Boulder. Your additional skill points are going to go into Firestorm for synergies, and you are now a cool down monster. We're at the point in Diablo 2, since each skill has its own effective cooldown, there's no longer global cooldowns. You are now on a rotation. The whole point of this build is to clear as much density as possible, and it has access to 3 damage types, because we are also running an Act 3 mercenary that's lightning. The main reason why we are doing this is for the static. The Act 3 mercenary casts static all the time, especially when you're teleporting. If you have teleported and he is currently in the middle of a large area with a lot of monsters, the AI decision making seems to be choosing static over move or lightning the majority of the time. So that means that as you're teleporting around in positioning, rather than having a conviction aura, which is just increasing half of your total damage output, this thing is just chunking every monster around you for total percentages of the remaining life. It's like an entire screen width's worth of applied crushing blow at FCR frames. Now, what we played around with for the pipe dream was Plague. The idea of getting that sometimes you get that lower res, and it's like you have bootleg infinity. And I gotta say, one, it doesn't really proc that much, although it did proc a decent amount in Chaos Sanctuary, but it's against the fire immunes, and we don't really care about that against them because we can't break them. I would say putting a spirit into this slot is a much better option overall, but I wanted to test it out so that you didn't have to. The rest of it, I do think maybe a Griffin's, Skin of the Viper Magi, and then some survivability with Storm Shield. So he's getting good plus to skills, good FCR, but really high res and PDR so he can stay alive. How does it play? I'm going to try to show you the way that I'm controlling the field with this build so that you get a better idea of what you want to do. So the thing that you need to understand about 2 of the most impactful skills on this build, which are the Volcano and the Fissure, is that they have something called next hit delay. If a monster is affected by something with next hit delay, it can't be hit by something else that applies next hit delay within a certain frame of time. To give you an idea, the big volcano that comes out of the ground is a 10 frame next hit delay. So if you get hit by the middle of the volcano, you can't get hit by the comets coming out of the volcano or fissure for 2/5 of a second. That's why you always felt like your damage really wasn't adding up. And that's probably because you were casting fissure with volcano right on top of it. But these 2 skills are actually interrupting one another. And then on top of that, even if a monster wouldn't be dealt damage by next hit delay, it's still considered to be in that grace period. So the physical damage of Volcano won't apply to fire immunes if they're standing underneath a fissure. How do you take these 2 massive AoE effects, get the damage out of them, and also allow yourself to kill fire? Drop your fissure over here, you drop your Volcano over here. So now you see, I have almost an entire screen of coverage of AoE damage. If anything stands on top of the Volcano, it'll take damage. All of these boulders coming out will take damage. And your Fissure's doing damage over here. Now, if it was just these 2 skills, that would be kind of good enough. But on top of that, you have Armageddon, which is doing fire and physical damage all around you. Doesn't have next hit delay. And you have Molten Boulder, which is doing burn, fire damage, and physical damage on impact and explosion. And that also doesn't have next hit delay. So, while you have your AoE of Armageddon keeping you safe in this bubble, you have your Fissure over here killing one pack, you have your Volcano over here killing another pack, you're casting Molten Boulder down the middle to keep moving monsters around in these AoE effects. Now, what if it went even further? What if, while this was happening, your Act 3 Mercenary, which is keeping very far back from every monster, is staticking once every second or two, literally reducing their total life by a quarter at least until it gets down to lower life. Sure, Conviction Aura is nice to increase your fire damage, but your fire damage was already very powerful. Now that you can easily rely on the physical damage component of the Fire Druid build, you can go into places with pure fire immunes and still clear in really good time. You're watching it right now. That's us in Chaos Sanctuary. The only thing that slows you down in there is if Infector of Souls is spawned with both physical immunity as well as high resistances in general, and even then he can still get taken down over time. So if they and when they do fix how bosses are interacting, how the modifiers are applying, I even think that you'd be able to pretty cleanly kill Diablo, at least on players 1 settings. And then if you go anywhere without fire and physical immunes walking around, you absolutely decimate. You could take it into cows, you could take it into the Icy Cellar. It goes anywhere that you need it to. I'm very impressed with this build, and I want to just very quickly go over the items that I have and also show you how much room for improvement that this has. We're using Heart of the Oak, Enigma, Spirit, 2 Maras, 2 Skill Rings, Arachnid Mesh, and then Mage Fist. And then we're also using the new rune word of Flickering Flame. The Flickering Flame could have +3 to staff mods if it's put into a Druid Pelt, and it can roll all the way up to -15 enemy res. This can also be a +3 skill amulet since you have really good resistances across the board, and you're also getting that massive fire res here. We are using a single skiller, so we are missing, if you include a Geeds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 with a torch, 9 from the Annihilus Charm. Right now, we are missing 12 plus skills off of the total part of this build. And while that many plus skills may not be as important on some builds versus others, the plus to skills are going to drastically increase our physical damage on all of our build ups. So the Armageddon, the Volcano, and the Molten Boulder are going to see massive benefits from having plus to skills on them. And that physical damage component is going to go higher and higher, theoretically meaning that you might be able to farm upwards to P3 in places with pure fire immunes, since you have access to static, lightning, and massive physical damage on 3 different abilities. So why not Infinity on an Act 2 Mercenary? Well, again, your fire damage is already absolutely exemplary, especially on low player count. Fissure absolutely dominates anything that isn't immune to fire. The problem with the Act 2 Mercenary is the Act 2 Mercenary walks out and engages the monsters, which makes them stop moving. And if a monster isn't moving through Fissure, they don't take damage. They actually have to walk over the different vents on the ground. They also have to walk over the volcano. They have to walk into range of your Armageddon, and they have to be in the line of fire for your Molten Boulder. While I was teleporting around and the mercenary was drawing aggro, I noticed that monsters were losing about like half of their total mobility and were staying in grouped clusters, not moving. So while you're able to get some damage down on them, you really want things moving towards you. And if you're able to reposition your mercenary and have that Merc running away actively when it's engaged in physical combat or in melee combat, you're able to funnel monsters into these areas where your AoE is overlapping and doing as much damage as possible. What do I think about all this? I legitimately believe that Fire Druid is going to be the best Elemental Druid build this latter season, and depending on how they keep the skills empowered as they are, potentially even stronger. All in all, I hope that this at the very least is a really good example of a place where an elemental build doesn't need infinity. And let me say that one more time. You are a pure elemental build that doesn't use infinity. That means that you're able to get into your endgame gear so much sooner. You're able to feel the extent of your power so much earlier. And even if you didn't have the Enigma, there are plenty of areas that you can go to farm right off the waypoint now, and also just farming cows, right? Probably one of the best places to farm with this build. So you don't need Enigma. It's definitely nice to have, but again, since your mercenary is going to be actively moving away, while teleporting will definitely make that exchange faster, you don't have all your monsters grouping up in one area and not moving through your AoE. They're going to keep moving with you and along with your mercenary. So I'm really excited for this. I think it's just super cool what they've done with the new mercenary changes and how they've taken a build that was basically in pure obscurity and possibly made it a top contender for density clear. Let me know what you think down below. I'll let the videos speak for themselves for what you can do with this build. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what the future holds for any additional changes they might make in the PTR section, and then eventually into the first ladder. So thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.